Hello, guys. Welcome back to another session. As promised, I told you I was going to deliver a compare and contrast paragraph video, and this is me delivering on my promise. So, this is a review of what we saw in class, but make sure that you do complete your notes in case you're missing something. Pause the video as many times as you need to. And yeah, let's get to it. So, the first thing we have to ask ourselves is what do we use compare and contrast paragraphs for? Now, this is very simple. We use it when we want to show similarities and differences between two or more topics, right? So the comparing part is the one that shows similarities, while the contrasting part is the one that shows the differences. Simple enough, right? Now, we have to establish one thing first. What was the general structure for paragraphs? So maybe this hamburger is going to help you out. So we got the top one, and that is called the topic sentence. Then we got the meats and the vegetable. This would be our supporting sentence, right? Basically, what supports what we stated as our topic sentence. And lastly, our bottom bun is going to be our concluding sentence. So we have to remember that the concluding sentence is very similar to the topic sentence. We state what we said in the topic sentence, obviously changing the words, but we want to finish off strong also. Now, what is important for us is to use key transitions and connectors. Since we're contrasting and comparing, we might want to use some of these. So these would be for comparison. You guys might want to get some from here, take a screenshot, copy some of them. I mean, there are more, but these are just some examples. And these would be our examples for contrasting. Again, copy some of these. Make sure that you have them at hand when you're trying to write your compare and contrast paragraph. So after we saw these keywords, how can we start a compare and contrast paragraph? Well, the first thing would be brainstorming, right? That's the first step to writing. But what happens once we know what topic we want to cover, or in this case, what topics we want to compare and contrast? Well, we need to plan our ideas. So that's the reason why we use graphic organizers, right? So in this case, we're going to use the Venn diagram. So everyone has seen Venn diagrams in their lifetime, one way or another. If not, let me show you the example. There it is. So it's the one with the circles. Now, you can have two or more circles. It just depends on how many topics you're comparing and contrasting. What you have on the outsides are differences, and then what you have in the middle, where they overlap, that's going to be similarities. Okay, and here we have an example. So this example might not be the best one, so let's go to the actual example right here. So let's say we're comparing St. Bernards to Cockapoos. So on the sides, where it does not overlap, we have the differences, right? So these are only characteristic to St. Bernards and not to Cockapoos, and vice versa, right? These are only characteristic to Cockapoos and not to St. Bernards. And in the middle, we would have our things that are similar, right? So this is just an example, and we would use this before we start writing just to know what we want to compare and contrast, and we have an idea before we start writing our paragraph. After that, we have to know how do we organize our compare and contrast paragraph. So we have two methods, okay? The first one we're going to explore and talk about is the block method. So what is the block method? Well, we have a definition here, but basically the block method is the one that separates it by topics, okay? So let's say in this example, we're talking about academic writing and professional writing. So first off, we're going to talk about academic writing and whatever we want to mention from academic writing, and then we move on to professional writing, and we mention whatever we want to mention from professional writing. Now, if this is not as clear, let's make it more visual. Let's get to the next slide. First, we would obviously start with our topic sentence, right? So the topic sentence is going to introduce what the reader can expect from the paragraph. Are we trying to say that something is better than something else? Or maybe we're just presenting both of the topics so the reader can make their decision or just be informed. Depending on what we want to write is what our topic sentence is going to be. Now, the body of the paragraph is going to be as follows. So like we said, we are focusing first off on one topic, so academic writing. And here are the 3 points that we want to mention about academic writing. After we're done with that, then we're going to talk about professional writing. And again, the 3 points that we want to mention about professional writing. So this is the structure for block method. It's going to be topic by topic. Okay. And obviously we finish off with our concluding sentence, which, like we mentioned, is a paraphrase version of our topic sentence. We really want to restate what we mentioned in the beginning. So if we're trying to persuade somebody to lean more towards one type of writing over the other one, this is where we're going to restate that. Now, here's an example of what a paragraph would look like. So at the beginning, we have our topic sentence, and then we have at the end our concluding sentence. Yeah, sorry. So if we read these, both of them are basically just mentioning that they are different. However, they're not trying to present one as being better than the other one. So they do match. They're not trying to persuade anything. They're just presenting both ideas. Now, everything in red has to do with academic writing. If you read this part, everything has to do with academic writing. And everything in blue is going to be professional writing. So we have everything separated clearly by topics. And we can see highlighted in gray, we have our transitions and connectors. In this case, we have the first one. Let's number this. Number one. Number one is showing contrast, while number 2 is showing comparison or similarities in this case. So this would be our example for block method. Now, let's go to the other type of method, which is, yes, point by point method. All right, let's dive into it. So point by point method is basically organizing something by subtopics, if that makes sense, right? So in the first, we're using the same example again, okay? We're still trying to compare academic writing and professional writing, but in this case, we're not going to focus on mentioning all of academic writing first and then all of professional writing. No, in this case, we're going to first start by talking about the paragraph structure. And we mentioned both paragraph structures, like comparing them at the same time, both academic and professional. Then we move on to the point of view, again, presenting both points of view from academic and professional. And lastly, we're going to focus on the tone of the paragraph. Again, focusing on academic and then on professional writing. Now, if this is not so clear yet, again, let's move on to visual examples, visual representation. So we would always start with our topic sentence. This is the same one, or this says exactly the same thing as the other one. We state what the paragraph is going to be about. Then we move on to the body. Now this is where it gets different. So if you guys check this out, this is exactly what we mentioned, right? These were our subtopics from what we saw in the block method. But in this case, we're talking about paragraph structure first and then mentioning both of these at the same time. We're comparing them at the same time. And then we're talking about point of view. And again, in point of view, we're mentioning both of these at the same time. And lastly, tone, and talking about both academic and professional writing side by side. Now, that would be the main difference between the block method and the point by point method. Obviously ending with a concluding sentence. Same principles apply than what we saw in the block method. Let's wrap this up by adding an example for point by point. So if we check out the topic sentence and the concluding sentence, they're basically the same, right? But the body is organized very differently. Here we can see it's being organized by different points, right? So it said that first we were talking about the paragraph structure. but we're talking about academic, and then we're also talking about professional, both in the same area. Now let's focus on the second point. Second point, here we're talking about academic, and here we're talking about professional writing, again in the same area, side by side. And lastly, we're talking about our third point. Here we're talking about the tone. First we're talking about the writing, and then we're talking about academic, again both at the same time. And if you pay attention here we kind of get a chance to use a little bit more transitions and connectors. And as you can see here in gray, you can find them, check them out. And yeah, this is basically a structure for point by point. Now, I want to add something here at the end. So hopefully nobody's falling behind. Everyone can understand everything clearly. But should we prioritize using one over the other one? And if so, how am I going to decide that? Do I have to flip a coin? Am I going to let the teacher decide? Am I going to let my teammates decide? How am I going to determine which method I want to use? Well, there are general rules for these cases. So here we go with the first one. So we're generally going to use the block method for short text. We're talking about paragraphs, like nothing too extensive. Why? Because we don't want the reader to lose track, right? If it's a long one, they're going to lose track. But if it's something short, you can clearly present both things separate, and they're not going to forget something by the end, right? So if it's short, we tend to use the block method. This is a general rule. This is not something set in stone. So if you do want to go for the point by point method, by all means, you already saw the examples, right? They were paragraphs, both of them, and they were both in different styles. Now, we already mentioned this but the point by point method would be used then for long texts or essays, let's say. So why? Let's say we have a really long essay, something that a reader by the end is probably going to forget what we wrote at the beginning. It depends on the person again, but yeah, a lot of people tend to forget what they read at the beginning. Also, if we're trying to persuade somebody, if you're using the block method, I think more people are going to tend to be persuaded or lean towards the thing that they read last. Why? Because it's the thing that they have fresh in their head, right? So if it's an extremely long essay, they probably forgot about the benefits that you mentioned from the first item, and they're only going to remember the benefits from the second item. And that is exactly why it's preferred to use block method for short text and the point by point method for the long ones. That way, they always have both items at the same time. Again, this is just something that's preferred. It's suggested. Nothing is set in stone. And with that, we reach the end. If you guys do have any questions, make sure that you ask me, leave me messages, leave me an email, or just ask me in person. But yeah, hopefully you guys learned a lot. If you had any questions and something was not clear in class, hopefully this helped clarify them. Well, that would be it for me. Make sure that you drop a like. But see you guys. Take care. See you in the next one.